When I first joined the company, I thought my life was finally taking the shape I'd dreamed of for years. Fresh out of my previous job, with my resume barely shining in comparison to others, I hadn't expected to land a position in one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Yet there I was, 25, sitting behind a sleek glass desk, my name on a polished silver plate, and the constant hum of ambition all around me. What struck me most in those first weeks wasn't the grandeur of the building or the intimidating level of professionalism, it was her. Elena Moretti, our 30-year-old CEO, had a presence that could silence a room without her saying a single word. She wasn't unkind, but there was a chill to her demeanor, the kind of cold elegance that made people respect her but never approach her. I admired her from a distance, watching the way she handled boardroom tension like it was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. Her voice was calm but commanding, her expressions carefully measured, as though she weighed every word before letting it escape. I never expected her to notice me. Sure, I worked hard, took initiative, and perhaps went a little overboard making sure my reports were flawless. But I was just one of dozens of new employees, eager faces blending into the background of her empire. So when her assistant appeared at my desk one Thursday afternoon and told me, "The CEO would like to see you in her office," my first thought was, what did I do wrong? Her office felt like another world, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city skyline, leather-bound books lining the shelves, and a faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air. Elena was standing by the window when I entered, her back to me, hands folded neatly behind her. She didn't turn immediately, letting the silence stretch long enough for my heartbeat to quicken. "Close the door, Miss Sophia," she said, her voice smooth but unreadable. I obeyed, clutching my notebook in case she wanted some sudden report. But when she finally turned to face me, there was something in her expression I couldn't quite place. Not anger. Not even dissatisfaction. It was deliberation. "I'm going to be very direct with you," she began, crossing the room until she stood just a few feet away. "I need to get married." I blinked. Surely, I had misheard her. She continued before I could say a word. "My late father left a clause in his will. Our family company, this company, will only be transferred fully into my name if I am married. It was his outdated way of ensuring stability, I suppose. The board has been circling like vultures, waiting for me to fail that condition so they can divide his legacy." I could only stare at her, my mind struggling to process whether this was some strange metaphor for a business merger or if she was actually saying what it sounded like. "I don't want to marry," she said flatly, "but I will, for the sake of the company. I don't have time for a relationship, nor do I wish for one in the traditional sense. What I need is someone discreet, trustworthy, and willing." Her gaze locked with mine, unflinching. "That's why I'm asking you." A sharp, breathless laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "You're asking me to marry you?" "I'm offering you a proposal," she corrected. "A legal arrangement. In return, you'll be compensated generously, and your position here will be more secure than most." I should have said no. The whole thing was absurd. I had known her for barely a month, and she was offering marriage like she was offering me a contract to sign. Yet there was something in her tone, no pretense, no games, just an unusual kind of sincerity. She wasn't trying to charm me, she was telling me exactly what she wanted, no more, no less. Still, my stomach twisted with doubt. "Why me?" Her lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "Because you're competent, discreet, and you don't look at me like everyone else does. You see me as a person, not a title. That's rare." The room felt smaller suddenly, the weight of her words pressing against me. Logic screamed at me to walk away, but another voice, quieter, reckless, whispered that maybe this was fate's strange way of putting me somewhere I never imagined I'd be. I heard my own voice agree before my mind had fully caught up. "All right, I'll do it." She nodded once, as though she'd known my answer all along. "Good. We'll arrange everything immediately." As I walked out of her office, my pulse still racing, one truth settled deep inside me: I had no idea what I'd just stepped into. And whatever it was going to change everything. The wedding was everything a marriage shouldn't be, beautiful but hollow. The ceremony was held in an exclusive private hall, the kind where everything gleamed as if touched by gold. Crystal chandeliers hung above us, White roses lined the aisle, and our guests, mostly business associates, board members, and a few strategically chosen relatives, watched with polite detachment. There were no tears of joy, no heartfelt speeches, no shared glances full of unspoken promises. Just signatures on documents, a practiced exchange of vows, and the faint, perfunctory touch of her lips against mine for the benefit of the cameras. Elena was elegant, as always. Her wedding gown was understated yet flawless, pure silk that draped perfectly over her frame. But she wore the same expression she did in board meetings, calm, unreadable, businesslike. I, on the other hand, smiled through the whole thing, because I didn't know what else to do. After the reception, an elaborate dinner where she spent most of the time in conversation with shareholders, we left for her penthouse. The place was stunning, all clean lines and expansive windows, but it felt more like a showroom than a home. She led me to a separate bedroom prepared for me and said, "I'll be in my office for the rest of the evening. Make yourself comfortable." That was our first night as a married couple. The days that followed were a quiet exercise in restraint. Elena was never rude, never dismissive, but her politeness was so precise it kept me at arm's length. She'd ask if I needed anything when she passed me in the hallway, thank me if I made coffee, and offer a brief nod before disappearing into her office or leaving for meetings. I tried. I made tea the way she liked it, no sugar, just a hint of lemon. I left little notes on the fridge, "Good luck at your meeting today," or "Don't forget your lunch." Sometimes I'd pick up fresh flowers for the dining table, hoping a bit of color might soften the atmosphere. She always acknowledged these gestures with a courteous thank you, but her tone never shifted from professional. There were moments when I thought I caught her watching me, like when I was reading by the window and glanced up to find her gaze lingering, but she'd look away before I could be sure. I told myself I was being foolish. This wasn't a love story. This was an agreement. Still, I couldn't help wanting to close the gap between us. One rainy evening, I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, and it struck me how familiar the emptiness felt. It took me back to my childhood home, large, cold, and filled with silences that spoke louder than any words. My parents had been busy people, too busy for affection. I'd learned early to find comfort in the smallest gestures, a teacher remembering my name, a neighbor waving at me. I suppose that's why I kept trying with Elena, because I knew what it felt like to need warmth and not get it. But in those first weeks, my efforts felt like drops of water on stone, noticed but never absorbed. And yet, despite the distance, I didn't walk away. Something in her silence made me curious. Something in her restraint made me want to stay. Even if, at that point, I couldn't explain why it happened slowly, almost imperceptibly, like ice melting under the faintest sunlight. At first, Elena's responses to my efforts were still measured, polite nods, the same clipped thank yous. But something in her eyes had softened. I noticed it one morning when I brought her coffee into her office. "You like it with exactly 2 shots, no sugar," I said, setting the cup beside her papers. She glanced up, the faintest flicker of surprise crossing her face. "You remembered." It was such a small moment, but I carried it with me all day. Not long after, she caught the flu. She tried to hide it at first, arriving at work with pale cheeks, keeping tissues discreetly under her desk, but I noticed. That night, I made her ginger tea and insisted she rest. She resisted at first, muttering about deadlines, but finally allowed herself to lie on the sofa while I draped a blanket over her. "You're stubborn," I teased. Her eyes closed, but I caught the faint curve of her lips. "So are you." It was the first time I'd seen her smile without caution. In the weeks that followed, I began to see glimpses of the woman beneath the CEO mask. Over dinner one night, an unplanned meal together after we both worked late, she admitted she loved the sound of rain. "It feels safe somehow," she said, staring out at the city lights through the glass walls. Another time, she told me about her father. Not the affectionate parent people might imagine, but a man obsessed with control. "He believed people only stayed if they had something to gain," she said, her voice tight. "That's why the will was written the way it was. A test. Or maybe a trap." I wanted to tell her I wasn't here for the company, that I didn't need anything from her except her trust. But I knew words wouldn't be enough. Trust was earned in actions, not declarations. Then came the evening of the company's annual gala. It was my first time attending one of these events, and I was hyper-aware of the way people's eyes followed Elena wherever she went. Midway through the night, one of the board members made a sly remark about her marriage of convenience, loud enough for several guests to hear. Before Elena could respond, I stepped forward. "Careful," I said, my tone calm but sharp. "It's unwise to underestimate someone who built this company's future while others were busy talking about her personal life." The man looked taken aback, muttered something about a joke, and walked away. Elena didn't say anything in that moment, but later, when we were leaving the event, she brushed her fingers against mine, a fleeting touch, but deliberate. "Thank you," she murmured. It was the first time she'd thanked me with warmth in her voice. The touch lingered in my mind for days, a fragile thread between us that felt like the start of something neither of us dared name yet. And though the walls around her hadn't fallen, they were no longer as high. The rain had been falling all evening, steady and soft at first, then heavier, until the sound against the windows became a constant hush. I'd always loved rainy nights, the way they seemed to wrap the world in quiet, but I didn't expect this one to become a turning point. It happened just after 9. A sharp crack of thunder rattled the glass, and the lights in the penthouse flickered once before going out entirely. The city skyline still glowed faintly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, we were plunged into darkness. "Well," I said, standing in the living room with a candle I'd fished from the kitchen drawer, "so much for finishing your emails tonight." From somewhere down the hall, I heard her dry laugh. Maybe it's the universe telling me to stop working for once. Minutes later, she appeared barefoot, holding a bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. "No point sitting in the dark without something to drink," she said, her voice softer than usual. We settled on the floor in front of the window, the flicker of candles painting gold across her features.
The rein bluered the city lights, turning them into watercolor smudges.
For once, Elena didn't look like the CEO everyone feared or admired. She looked human. We talked about small things at first. How the weather always seemed worse when you had nowhere to go. The fact that she hadn't had a real vacation in years. But somewhere between the second and third glass, the conversation shifted. "My father," she paused, swirling her wine. "He didn't believe in unconditional love. Said it didn't exist. People were either loyal because they had to be or because they were getting something out of it. That's why the will was written the way it was, marry or lose the company. It wasn't just about tradition. He wanted to prove his point. That no one would marry me unless there was something in it for them." Her gaze stayed fixed on the dark curve of her glass, but I could feel the weight of the confession in the space between us. "I've been used before," she went on. "By friends, by people I trusted. I thought, if I kept myself separate, no one could hurt me. But it's lonely. You start wondering if maybe he was right." I let her words settle before I spoke. "I've never been married," I said quietly. "Not because no one asked. But because I never found someone I could give my heart to without wondering if they'd break it." Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. 2 people bound by a contract, yet bound. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a long moment, we just looked at each other. 2 people bound by a contract, yet bound even more by unspoken fears. "I don't know what this is between us," I admitted, "but I'm not here to hurt you, Elena." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she shifted closer, the scent of jasmine and wine surrounding me. Then, slowly, she leaned her head against my shoulder. The contact was light, tentative, but it felt like a door opening. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "For staying." I didn't move. I didn't want to break the moment. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and sure, as if sealing some silent promise neither of us was ready to put into words. It began with small things. One morning over breakfast, Elena casually slid a file across the table. "What do you think of this proposal?" she asked, sipping her coffee as if it were the most ordinary question in the world. I blinked. "You want my opinion?" Her eyes flicked up, almost amused. If I didn't, I wouldn't have asked. From then on, she started including me in discussions about the company. Not just the polite updates she gave in the early days, but actual decision-making. Sometimes we'd talk in her office after hours, leaning back in our chairs, tossing ideas back and forth like old colleagues. Other times, she'd ask my thoughts while we were curled up on the couch at home, her legs tucked under her as she scanned through spreadsheets. Somewhere along the way, the formality between us faded. I learned she had a dry sense of humor that surfaced when she was relaxed, that she had an inexplicable fondness for bad puns, and that she liked adding too much chili sauce to her noodles. In return, she learned that I couldn't whistle to save my life, that I'd once accidentally dyed my hair green in college, and that I could make a mean chocolate cake. We developed inside jokes, small comments that would make no sense to anyone else, but could make her hide a smile behind her hand during a meeting. I started catching her looking at me across the table at dinners, her expression softer than it had ever been in those early days. I realized I was falling for her in the quiet moments, the way her voice lowered when she said my name, the way she remembered how I liked my tea without asking, the way she listened when I spoke, even if it was about something trivial. This wasn't the guarded, distant CEO I'd first met. This was Elena when she felt safe. And she had a kind heart. She just didn't show it to many people. At public events, the change between us was subtle but unmistakable. At a charity auction, she reached for my hand without hesitation when photographers swarmed us. I felt the gentle squeeze of her fingers, the warmth of her palm. At a press conference, when a reporter made a veiled comment about our marriage being strategic, she didn't flinch, just smiled and said, "My wife is my greatest asset, and not in the way you're implying." We began defending each other instinctively. She shielded me from the harsher side of corporate politics, making sure I was never blindsided in meetings. I, in turn, made it my quiet mission to read the room at events, steering her away from conversations that would drain her energy. It was still a marriage born from necessity, at least on paper. But in the spaces between those official lines, something real was blooming. And while I didn't dare say it out loud yet, I knew I was hers, in ways that had nothing to do with contracts. It started with a headline. Sophia wasn't even awake when her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. But Elena was. She sat at the edge of the bed, her tablet glowing in the darkness. The words were bold, cruel, and far too easy to believe if you didn't know the truth. Marriage of convenience? Documents reveal Sofia Alvarez's financial motives. Dozens of articles flooded the feed, each one dissecting their relationship, speculating about secret deals, and showing photographs of supposed evidence that Sophia had demanded a share in Elena's company as part of their marriage. The photos weren't even real contracts. Most were heavily edited or taken out of context, but they were enough to plant doubt in anyone's mind. Elena. Sophia's voice was groggy as she pushed herself upright. Why are you up? What's? She froze when she saw the look on Elena's face. The coldness, there wasn't the same kind she had seen when Elena was dealing with competitors in the boardroom. No, this was personal. This was a wall slamming down. Is this true? Elena's voice was steady, but there was a tremor underneath. Sophia blinked, still half asleep. Is what true? Elena turned the tablet toward her. Sophia's own face stared back at her from the article header, framed by accusations. Sophia's stomach dropped. This is garbage. Who even? I asked you a question, Elena cut in, sharper now. Is any of this true? The betrayal in her tone stung more than the words themselves.
Elena, no.
Of course not. You think I'm with you for money? After everything. After everything, Elena interrupted, standing abruptly, I think I don't know what's real anymore. The room felt smaller. The shadows seemed to press in around them. Rain tapped steadily against the windows, too soft to cut the tension. Elena, listen to me. This is a setup. Someone wants to break us apart. Convenient, Elena said bitterly, that you benefit no matter what happens. Sophia flinched. You can't possibly believe that. I've been here before, Sophia. Elena's voice cracked for just a second. People telling me they cared. Then taking what they wanted. Leaving me with nothing. Sophia stood now, her voice rising. I'm not them. I have never lied to you. Not about how I feel. Not about why I'm here. Then why did they find those documents? Because someone made them. Sophia's eyes were burning, her throat tightening. You know I didn't marry you for your company. You've seen me fight for you, defend you, love you. Love. Elena scoffed, but it was the kind of scoff that sounded like it was holding back pain. What do you know about love that isn't tied to what I can give you? That hurt more than anything Elena had ever said. Sophia felt her breath catch, her body go cold. For a moment, she almost reached for Elena's hand, desperate to break through the fear in her eyes. But she didn't. Something inside her knew Elena wasn't ready to listen. If you can stand here and ask me if any of this was real, Sophia said quietly, then maybe you never believed in me at all. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. Elena didn't stop her. Didn't move. Didn't say a word. The click of the door shutting behind Sophia was deafening. Outside, the rain was heavier now. She stood under the awning for a moment, staring into the blur of streetlights and water, her chest aching. She thought about the wine by candlelight, the nights they laughed over shared secrets, the times Elena had looked at her like she was the only safe place left in the world. And she thought about how, with just one headline, all of that was now in question. Sophia started walking into the rain. She didn't know if she was heading toward a hotel or just anywhere that wasn't home. All she knew was that she needed space to breathe. Because right now, she wasn't sure if love was enough, not when suspicion could destroy it overnight. I hadn't slept in 2 nights. My mind replayed our last conversation. Her eyes hard as glass, her voice sharp enough to cut through my chest. But somewhere beneath the hurt, a part of me still needed answers. That's when I found it. A stray email buried in a legal folder, overlooked in the chaos. Correspondence between one of Elena's senior board members and an outside PR firm, discussing fabricating a narrative to discredit Sophia and weaken Elena's influence. The forged documents, the rumors, they were never about us. They were about power. For a moment, I imagined barging into her office with the proof, making her see the truth in my eyes. But then I remembered her expression when she asked me if our marriage was ever real. She didn't just doubt the papers, she doubted me. And love doesn't survive on doubt. I compiled every piece of evidence into a clean, undeniable package and sent it to her personal email.
No explanations. No please.
Just the truth. Then I wrote the only letter that mattered. Elena, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know now the attack wasn't yours to control, and I never blamed you for being cautious. But we both know trust, once cracked, is hard to restore. You deserve to lead without fear. And I deserve to be loved without question. You gave me more than a marriage. You gave me a home, a place where I could believe in myself again. I will carry that with me always. The evidence I've attached will clear your name, protect your position, and I hope, remind you of the loyalty we once shared. Take care of yourself, Elena. The world is colder without you, but I hope one day you find the kind of love that never makes you doubt. Sophia. The city looked different from the back seat of the taxi. Lights smeared against the wet glass, skyscrapers blurring into shadows. I didn't know where I was going yet. Only that it wouldn't be here. Somewhere in her penthouse office, Elena would find the email. She would open the file. She would see the board member's betrayal in black and white. And then she would find my resignation letter on her desk. I pictured her standing there, holding the paper with that quiet stillness she wore when she was thinking deeply. Maybe her hand would tremble. Maybe she'd curse my name. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd whisper it. The taxi turned a corner, and the last glimpse of the building vanished behind us. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the city fade away. She got the company. And I hope one day, she finds the kind of love that never makes her doubt.